For the first time in this chapter, come across something new. And by that I'm referring to the characters. Everything so far from verse 1 down through verse 29, the verses have highlighted central figures, central heroes of the faith. In most verses, but maybe one, it's all referring to one character. And so we get to focus then on those individuals and hopefully relate to them. Look with me in verse 4. You can see the chapter says, by faith Abel. Then in verse 5 it says, by faith Enoch. In verse 7, by faith Noah. Verse 8, by faith Abraham. Again in verse 9, by faith he, or Abraham. Verse 11, through faith also Sarah. Verse 17, by faith Abraham again. Verse 20, by faith Isaac. Verse 21, by faith Jacob. Verse 22, by faith Joseph. In verse 23, we've got two individuals singled out without being named. It says, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents. So we could say that's by faith Moses' parents. Verse 24, by faith Moses. Verse 27, by faith he, or by faith Moses. Verse 28, again, through faith he, through faith Moses. And then last week we looked at verse 29, which says, by faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land. And we learned by comparing Scripture to Scripture that it was not the faith of the Israelites, but it was the faith of Moses. So we could easily and accurately read that by saying, by Moses' faith they passed through the Red Sea. And then we get to verse 30, and verse 30 will be the first verse that doesn't highlight an individual's faith by name or even by inference. Let's read it, verse 30. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about 7 days. So you can see in this brief verse, there's no direct reference to an individual. Only to an object, only to the walls of Jericho. And obviously, the author of Hebrews is not saying that the walls of Jericho had faith and by which they fell down. Hebrews 11:30 is indirectly referencing someone's faith as it refers to, at the end of that verse, someone or somebody's compassing the walls of Jericho. But unlike the previous verse, there is no other scripture in the Bible to point out who that individual or individuals were. We don't have any Old Testament scripture to highlight the faith or the unbelief of anyone referring to the account of Jericho's walls falling down. We had Psalm 106 and Exodus 14 to shed more light on verse 29, which taught us the valuable lesson of increasing the faith of others by possessing and practicing our increased faith before them. But in this verse, verse 11, we have no additional information. Furthermore, this verse itself connects someone's faith to someone who compassed the walls of Jericho about 7 days. So what can we conclude about this verse? What can we see in this canvas on this hall of faith that we've been walking through? We must conclude for the first time in this chapter that this chapter is highlighting the faith of an entire nation, of an entire assembly, of an entire congregation. While all of the previous portraits have had on them the names of individuals inscribed, this canvas, verse number 3, has the picture of all these people, men and women, leader and follower, priest and soldier. All these people are in the canvas, and inscribed and credited with faith would be the entire congregation of the children of Israel. If it was just their leader's faith that was credited for the walls of Jericho coming down, then it would have said, by faith Joshua brought the walls of Jericho down. But it wasn't just Joshua's faith. It was the faith of all those who compassed the city 7 days. For the first time in Hebrews, then, we get to see what it looks like to have an entire congregation full of faith, an entire assembly with increased faith. We get to see what it will accomplish. We get to see men and women together bursting with faith, leader and follower together bursting with faith. We get to see all of the people bursting with faith. And as a member of this church, this excites me. As a pastor of this church, this passage excites me because this canvas may show a nation of ancient Jews marching around in ancient Jericho, but I believe it could easily be a canvas of modern believers marching around a modern community. This verse is a picture for what this church could be. So let's look at the Old Testament information with the New Testament revelation in mind. Turn back to Joshua chapter 6. Joshua chapter 6. Again, we are going to hinge our discussion this morning on Hebrews 11:30, which is the only verse that sheds any light on Joshua chapter 6. And it tells us that this great accomplishment we're about to read was accomplished by faith. Now in Deuteronomy, at the end of it, Moses died, and he left the nation of Israel under the leadership of Joshua. Joshua chapter 1, God comes to him and encourages him. He says, be strong, be courageous. You're going to lead my people into the promised land. Don't worry about it. I'm going to be with you. And before miraculously doing that, before crossing the Jordan River, as Moses crossed the Red Sea, Joshua sends 2 spies into Jericho. They get into Jericho and they search out the city. They meet a woman by the name of Rahab, and Rahab gives them the news. Gives them the headlines in the paper, and the headlines in the paper were people terrified of the God of Israel. And so these 2 spies were protected by Rahab. They got out of the city in time before the king found them. They come back to Joshua with smiles on their faces, courage in their hearts, and victory in their steps. And they say to Joshua, truly, the Lord hath delivered into our hands all the land. Even all the inhabitants of the country do faint because of us. So these 2 spies, along with Joshua, and no doubt this spread throughout the camp, there was excitement. There was this anticipation of victory. They believed that God was with them. They believed that God was going to deliver the promised land to them. So let's read the story this morning. Verse number 1, Joshua chapter 6. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, and none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, see, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor, and ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And it shall come to pass, that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up, every man straight before him. So that's the battle plan. God assures Joshua the city is going to be delivered into his hands, the people's hands. They're going to march around the city once a day for 6 days. On the 7th day, they're going to march around it 7 times. When they're all done with that 7th time, the priests are going to blow the rams. The people are going to shout. Walls are going to fall down flat. They're going to go in and conquer the city. Verse number 6. So Joshua, the son of Nun, called the priests and said unto them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said unto the people, pass on, and compass the city, and let him that is armed pass before the ark of the Lord. And it came to pass, when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests did exactly that. Verse number 10, and Joshua commanded the people, saying, ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice. That's why you know kids weren't allowed on this trip. Right? Unbelievable. Sometimes you tell, just be quiet. But, no. Shh. No humming either. It's impossible for kids not to make noises. So this was only for adults. You shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice. Neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth until the day I bid you shout. Then shall ye shout. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about it once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. So here are these men, these priests, these soldiers, Joshua. They're armed with faith, and they head out on day 1, and they march around Jericho. Now, we don't have any archaeological evidence of Jericho. We don't know how big it was. We don't know how long it took to march around there. We don't know if it was a small city, a big city. We only know it was a walled city. So they walked around this great city, this walled city, I should say, and because this congregation possessed congregational faith, they were blessed. And they were blessed with a few things. Number one, they were blessed with congregational peace. What a stark contrast this story and last week's story. Remember last week's story? Moses brings the children of Israel up to the brink of the Red Sea, and they get there, and they're all loving life until they look back and see the Egyptians coming their way. Remember that story? And the Israelites, what do? They panicked. They were so afraid. They began to have all kinds of issues. They began to accuse Moses of leading them out there to kill him. And they were all worked up. Why? What did last week tell us? Only one person had faith in that camp last week. It was Moses. In this camp, it's congregational faith. They all had it. And in this camp, we see them compass the city once, and there's no panic, there's no fear, there's no accusations. Oh, Joshua, you brought us out here to battle cities with walls and weapons, and we don't have all this stuff. You brought us out here to kill us. No, you don't read about this division. You don't read about this fretfulness. You don't read about fear in this story. This story is incredibly different. The people at this time, they are calm, cool, and collected. There's no hint of distress, no hint of division, no hint of discontentment, no evidence of fear, no evidence of anxiousness anywhere in the text, anywhere in the congregation. You know what that teaches us? It teaches us that faith in God brings peace from God. And if you have congregational faith, if we have faith in God, then we're going to have the peace of God congregationally. And it was for this reason that no individual or group of individual is found panicking in our text. And maybe you've noticed how contagious fear is. Have you noticed that? Fear can spread through a community like wildfire. It's very contagious, like an infectious disease. If one person says, "Oh, did you hear?" That's like the introduction of fear. Did you hear? No. What should I be afraid of? Somebody's on the loose. Where are they? Oh, I think it was Rochester. Then who cares? But they could have made it here by now. And whenever you hear about some great crisis, maybe a prisoner escaped, the whole community can be stricken with fear. I watch a lot of crime shows, as you know, and a lot of times when there's this murder or some crime in a small community and they don't know what happened, they will always report the whole community was terrified. There's a murderer loose among us. Like he's going to pick every door in the village. You know, we just all assume we're next. Fear is like that. That's why back when I grew up, how many of you remember the show Unsolved Mysteries? Bad show to watch when you're a little kid and your parents aren't home and it's dark. I assumed I was going to find every one of these guys right outside my window looking at me. Fear is like that. You can watch something and begin to get taken over by fear, and then when you are, someone says, "Oh, they're afraid. I must be afraid too." Fear is contagious, and a community plagued by infectious fear will be a community paralyzed by infectious fear. When we're afraid, what do? We stop. Don't go outside. They might be out there. So we don't go anywhere. If there's a storm coming anymore now, we're just such wimpy people. We rush to Wegmans and get all these supplies, and then we hang out inside like we're going to face some great storm. Listen, fear paralyzes us. Fear puts us in a box. That's why any good leader knows that he or she must protect their assembly, their congregation from fear. Fear, because it's crippling and devastating to a congregation, will lead a leader to do something about it. Why do good mothers always try to relieve the fears of their children? Because they know that fear will paralyze those kids. A good general will do what he can to strip his soldiers of unhealthy fear. A good president will stand before the people and try to strip them of their fears and relieve them and assure them and let them know everything will be fine. A good pastor will do the same for his sheep. And nothing strips a person from fear. Nothing brings in peace like faith. Faith is fear's greatest foe and peace's greatest friend. But this is important to our discussion. You cannot experience the peace of God on the backs of somebody else's faith. Dear ladies, you cannot experience the peace of God because your husband has faith and you do not. You cannot instill your children with the peace of God because you have faith in God. It needs to be your faith in order to experience that peace in your life. Otherwise, it's merely just a little bit of calming. It's a Band-Aid. You need to have your own faith. And if we as a congregation will ever experience true peace, then we as a congregation must experience and possess true faith. Peace is necessary when facing great challenges or great obstacles. The peace of God that passeth all understanding is necessary when facing great tragedies or great losses, when facing great adversity or great tests. And be sure, congregation, we will face great walls. We know not what tomorrow holds, but you can be sure that as man is born into trouble, as the sparks fly upward, we will experience tragedy again. We will experience obstacles again. And if we lack congregational faith, if we lack communal faith, if we lack the faith as a corporate body, then we will be paralyzed with congregational fear. We will be plagued with congregational panic, and we may be harmed with congregational division. We're all familiar with it. Sporting events is a good example of this. Think of a stadium full of fans who really believe in their team. And listen, there's no greater example than the New England Patriots, as much as it pains me. But there's a team there that dominates every game. You ever watch them as much? And of course, the NFL puts them on every possible chance. So even if you want to escape them, you're forced to watch them. And sometimes I watch them. And you see the team's down by 7 points. Nobody in that stadium is panicking. You know why? Because they're a bunch of believers. They believe their team will come through. So they're calm, cool, and collected. During the Super Bowl, even I, who hate the Patriots, I'm a believer. And I said, watch this. Here we go. And it was just like, it was purgatory. I don't believe in purgatory, but it was purgatory. I mean, we had to watch this, the Super Bowl. And it was like the worst possible scenario. They're going to come back, break every record possible. They did it. You know, Patriot fans, they didn't doubt, because they were believers, and that faith kept them calm, cool, and collected. Now, let's come to Buffalo. We love our team, but we're not believers, right? So as soon as we're up by 7, what do? Oh, here it comes. You know, right? And sure enough, here comes the team. They're coming down, and already the fans are anxious. We're nervous, and the other team scores. Oh, there we go. And we're yelling at each other. We're screaming at each other. People are leaving the stadium. You say, what is that? Panic, division, fear. It all hinges back to your belief system. And if you and I and we have faith in God, we will strip us of panic, of fear, of division. So when things get tough and we're up against some walls, we're going to see some walls soon. Boy, I sound like the president again. But when we're up against some walls, what we cannot afford to do is panic. We cannot afford to be divisive. We cannot afford to be fearful. What will stop that? Only faith in God. Not faith in your pastors, not faith in your parents, not faith in your fellow parishioners, but faith in God. That is the only thing that will bring us peace. Let's look at verse number 12, and secondly, see that congregational faith produces congregational patience. Verse number 6, and Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, and 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew with the trumpets. And the armed men went before them, but the rearward came after the ark of the Lord, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And then it says in verse 14, and the second day they compassed the city once and returned into the camp. So did they 6 days. Now, it's unclear, based on the text here, if what God told Joshua in the beginning, he ever communicated that to the people. Because God did tell Joshua, on the 7th day, you're going to do this, and then the walls will fall down, and you'll take the city. We don't see him telling the people that anywhere. In fact, I would tend to believe that they did not know how long it would take, nor did they know what would happen, because of what Joshua says to them in verse 10, when he says, you shall not shout nor make any noise until the day I bid you shout. So I tend to believe that he didn't tell them that. They just had to keep doing it day after day. So every morning for 6 days, the men of war, the priests get up, they get their trumpets, they get the ark, and they start to march around the city. It probably doesn't take all day, and then they come back to the camp and sit there. For 400 plus years, the children of Israel have waited for this moment to come into the promised land and get their promised land. For 4 decades, these families have waited to cross the Jordan River and now get what they were supposed to get in the first place. You've got armed men of war, soldiers. Now, I've not been in the military. Some of you have been. And I imagine if you're geared for war, especially if you're a young man, you're ready to tear into the enemy, I imagine sitting is the most annoying and most difficult thing to do. I imagine sitting there when you have been trained to win, when your families are waiting for their homes, you say, let's get this on, let's do this. But they had to go around the city, how boring by the way, walking around the city, and then come back to the camp and sit there for 6 days. And if they didn't know how many days they were going to do that for, don't you think part of them was saying, what are we doing? How many more days are we going to do this? I get it, let's go around once, let's scare them, let's make them afraid, but 6 days? But you know what they had? They had patience because there's no inclination of them arguing, no inclination of them complaining. There's no evidence that they're doing anything against Joshua. They are patiently following their leaders' orders. Faith brings with it so much virtue. Patience is one of them. I happen to believe that patience is perhaps the greatest evidence of faith in a person's life. Because by its very definition, faith is the evidence of things not seen, correct? Can I add another word and tell you what faith really is? Faith is the evidence of things not yet seen. In other words, if you believe that God is going to bless you, as Enoch did for diligently seeking Him, then you are believing that you will eventually see that blessing. The time frame doesn't matter. You can sit there and say, God is going to bless me based on His promise. Whether tomorrow or 10 tomorrows. Whether tomorrow or 10 years from now, I believe in the very goodness of God, so I will wait for the coming of the Lord. If you have faith, you're going to patiently wait for the intervention of God. You will not be impatient. When you possess faith in God, you need not to know when, because you already believe God will. Patience is far easier to entertain when you have faith, because if you believe God will, then you naturally believe in His will and in His time. Patience will be necessary for us, dear congregation, when facing challenges and obstacles. The walls of obstacle, the walls of tragedy, the walls of adversity, the walls of hardship will not come down in a day. And a lack of congregational faith at that point could plague our church with congregational impatience. You know what impatience is? Impatience will cause us to settle for man's solutions instead of God's solutions. Impatience will rob us of seeing the mighty hand of God. It will take from us the opportunity to experience the greatest blessings because we will settle for our hands, which are not so mighty. So let us look to God and let us be patient for the power of God. This is my favorite point. Look at verse 15. It came to pass in the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day and compassed the city after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. And it came to pass at the 7th time, when the priests blew with the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, shout, for the Lord hath given you the city. Verse 20, so the people shouted when the priests blew with the trumpets. And it came to pass, when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. You know what congregational faith will produce? It will produce congregational power. Their faith wasn't hinged on the priest. It wasn't hinged on the trumpets. It wasn't hinged on the armory of the men. It wasn't hinged on the leadership of Moses or Joshua. It wasn't hinged on their own ability to shout. It wasn't hinged on their unique battle plan. No, their faith was in God and in His power. This is an important biblical principle. This is what I want you to walk away with, if nothing else. Everybody hear this, please. Congregational faith offers more power than individual faith. What I am saying, based on the Bible, and I will show you in a moment, if we have faith, God will do more in our midst than if just you or you have faith. How can you say that, Pastor K? Can't one person accomplish much? One person can indeed experience the power of God in his or her life. But if God senses the presence of drastic unbelief in our midst, then God cannot do any mighty work among us. Take your Bibles, turn to Mark chapter 6. Hebrews 11:6 tells us that without faith, it's impossible to please God. And if we are a congregation plagued with unbelief, it will be impossible to please God. And if we are not pleasing God, how in the world will we ever expect the power of God? However, when we all congregationally, corporately, communally possess faith, we will be pleasing God on a higher level, on a communal level, and therefore experiencing the power of God. This is what we need to do. Ask any athlete or any performer, and they will tell you that performing in front of a stadium full of believers is far more inspiring than performing in front of a stadium of unbelievers with an occasional believer mingled in there. Have you ever noticed some of these musicians and athletes, they rise to such incredible levels on the field? That's why you'll hear somebody say they're a game time performer, because on the practice field they don't look that spectacular, but when they see around them hundreds of people, thousands of people that believe in them, they rise to a new level. Now, don't accuse me of saying God is that way, but I will tell you this. Faith moves God, and the more faith we possess corporately, the more God will be moved. God will be inspired to perform His greatest acts among us when He sees the greatest number of us believing in Him. God will be least likely to be moved to His greatest acts among us when He sees the least number of believing in Him. Mark chapter 6, verse number 1, and He, Jesus, went out from thence and came into His own country, and His disciples followed Him. Verse 2 tells us He taught in the synagogue, and the people didn't like that, and they said, "From whence hath this man these things? And what wisdom is this which is given unto Him, that even such mighty works are wrought by His hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and of Judah and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" And they were offended at Him. And Jesus says, "A prophet is not without honor, but in his own country." But look what verse 5 says. Verse 5 says, "And He could there do no mighty work, save that He laid His hands upon a few sick folk and healed them. And Jesus marveled because of whose unbelief?" Say it nice and loud. Whose unbelief did He marvel at? Mm-hmm. Corporate unbelief. Communal unbelief. He found a few people with faith. He healed a few sick folk. So yes, in our midst there are individuals here who, if you have faith, God will show up in your life individually. But if we are a congregation that by and large is plagued with unbelief, I'm telling you, you can pray all day long. God will not, because He cannot, by nature, do great things when we are not pleasing Him by giving Him the faith that He ought to have. You can read on to the rest of that passage. I think it's verse number... Or actually, it's in Matthew chapter 13. The same thing is written there, that He did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. Can I get you to take your Bibles and turn to Matthew 17? Let me give you one more text here to show you that it's not just about one person who can believe so greatly in God that God will do a great work there. It's got to be a congregational thing. Do you remember what happened to the Israelites in the wilderness? 12 spies went into the promised land. Only 2 came back and believed in God. The other 10 did not believe in God. What happened to that congregation? For 4 decades they sat in the wilderness while the unbelievers died. You say, God, can't you bring the children of Israel into the promised land? Moses believes in you. Joshua believes in you. Caleb believes in you. Isn't that enough? God said, how can I? Because nothing angers God like unbelief. Dads, moms, does it not drive you crazy when you tell your kids something that you know is a fact and they say, that's not right? I have a saying in my house that goes to this, thank you for informing me of my stupidity, child. Just recently I was traveling to a soccer game and one of my children said, we didn't go this way last time. I said, yeah, we did. Nuh-uh. Okay, all right. I didn't know you were driving. I didn't know you know these roads like I do. Right? That's what we do to God when we don't believe in God. Why would He rise to do great things among us if we cannot corporately believe in Him? Matthew 17, before we read it, you have to understand how the King James Bible was written. It's written in the Old English. And the pronouns ye and you are plural pronouns. Thou and thee are singular pronouns. Our language now, we use you for everything. Singular and plural. We say you. If you're Polish, you say yous, guys, but we all say you. Is that a Polish gig? I don't know what that's all about. But in the Old English, it's different. So when we read this passage, I want you to read this passage with that in mind. Verse 14, Matthew 17. And when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man, kneeling down to him and saying, verse 15, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic and sore vexed. For oft times he falleth into the fire, and oft into the water. And I brought him to thy disciples, plural, and they, plural, could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him hither to me. Verse 18, and Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him. Verse 19 now, the disciples, plural, they come to Jesus apart and said, why could not we cast him out? And Jesus said unto them, because of your, plural, unbelief. For verily I say unto you, plural, if ye, plural, have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye, plural, shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. Plural. I realize he's speaking to a group here, but the disciples came and they said, how come we couldn't do it? It was a group effort. I don't know if 2 of them started out and then more joined and they all got around and they tried hard. And Christ essentially said, you as a group didn't have the faith necessary to cast this demon out. And if you as a group can get yourselves together and as a group believe in me, ain't nothing going to be impossible to you. We always interpret that as one individual standing by a mountain and with enough faith say, remove into the sea, when the true interpretation of the Scriptures is corporate faith results in corporate power. A church can move God much quicker and bigger than an individual can. That's why you ever go to a church and you see a pastor who seems to be excited, seems to be dynamic, seems to be involved in the church and wants the best for the church, but that church is as dead as a doornail. Because a pastor cannot call down the power of God. It must be a congregation that does so. Hence the need for us corporately, congregationally, to increase our faith. And God's power will be necessary when the walls of our adversity pop up. And if we are to experience the greatest of works of God here at our church, we will need our greatest faith in our greatest number of people. Look at verse 24 and we'll be done. This is my favorite point. Congregational faith will produce congregational progress. Verse 20, the people shout. It says that the wall fell down flat at the end of the verse, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. Jump down to verse 24. And they burnt the city with fire. What is that? That's an immoral, or that's a moral progress. They got rid of the evil there. They burnt everything that was in there. Only the silver and the gold and the vessels of brass and of iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. What was that? That was financial progress. Verse 25, and Joshua saved Rahab the harlot alive and her father's household and all that she had. What was that? That was evangelistic progress, saving souls. And it says in verse 26, Joshua adjured them at that time, saying, cursed be the man before the Lord that riseth up and buildeth this city Jericho. Verse 27, so the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was noised throughout all the country. What's that? That's community progress. You've got moral progress in getting rid of the evil in their new land. You've got financial progress in seeing more silver, gold, brass, and iron come into the treasury of the house of God. You've got evangelistic progress in saving souls from the devastation that awaits them. And then you've got community progress. The reputation was now growing in the land. By bringing peace, faith allowed for them to wait for the power of God. By bringing patience, faith allowed them to experience the power of God. And when they saw the power of God, faith allowed them to accomplish much, to progress much. Now, I want to conclude with this without getting too specific, because no one here knows the future of this church. But if we are going to progress, if we are going to reach more people in our community with the truth, if we are going to grow our own congregation in faith and in size, if we are going to do those things, make no bones about it, we are going to face big walls. What we need to experience is the progress that the power of God will bring us. We need to experience growth and development on a moral level. We need to experience growth on an evangelistic level. We need to experience growth on a financial level. We need to experience growth in our reputation. Do you know how long we've been in our community? We've been in this community for over 4 decades. And let me tell you what concerns me, as it should you. Ask any average member of our community where we're located. And they'll say, I have no idea. Ask any member of our community who Calvary Heights Baptist Church is, and the average community member will say, I have no idea. You know what has to happen for this church to have an impact on the souls of men and women, boys and girls in our community, which is our Jerusalem, it's our area to minister to? We have to be noised throughout the whole country. You understand that if they don't know who we are, why do you think they'll know who Jesus is? Well, there's other churches. Yes, there are. Are they all preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ? By faith, without works? You understand? We are the bridge to the lost world around us. And if there is no bridge, there will be no souls saved. How did Rahab get saved? I realize we're not talking soul salvation, but how did Rahab get saved from the destruction that awaited Jericho? Joshua sent 2 spies into the community. But she already heard about that. You see, the problem with going into the community and just giving them the message is there's nothing for that message to be built upon. Had they come in and said, hey, Rahab, we're going to come in here and destroy this city, she'd say, yeah, okay. We have walls around us. Maybe you haven't noticed. Good luck with that. But because she already heard about what God was doing in that congregation, when they came, she said, I know, we're terrified. Save me. And if we want to reach people out there, go even 2 by 2, door by door, guess what they need to have already learned? That God is here. That we are giving. That we are here to minister to them. People need to know who we are before they're going to trust us. do you trust any old salesman that comes to your door? Here, invest your soul into my plan. Which is what we do. Here, just believe me. It's all good. This is about eternity. Heaven or hell, trust me. I got this covered. Why do we expect them to believe us? There's a lot of kooks out there. There's a lot of crazy people. So you know what we do? Let's start letting people know who we are. So that when we go to talk to them, I said, yeah, we know who you are. You have, what's it called? Credibility. The two spies had credibility because God was already working there. So we need to get some credibility. We need to make some progress in there. Oh, yes, guess what? If we ever are to expand these walls because of more people, more souls, growth, I just learned it's not free. We're going to have to grow financially. Now, isn't that scary? You don't mind talking about souls, but finances, we will need the power of God. We will need the power of God to accomplish the progress necessary here. We need to see more lives freed from the bondage of sin, from the bondage of apathy, and from the bondage of immorality. We need to see more souls saved from sin and from the devastation of it. We need to see more silver, more gold, more brass, and more iron. We need to see more progress on every level. Congregational faith brings progress on every front, but congregational unbelief will make us stagnant and good for nothing. You must hear this, and we're done. The progress I am speaking of today is not determined by increased attendance, but by increased faith. I have been encouraged and excited by increased attendance. Anytime there's more bodies to hear the Word of God, I believe God can do great things. But that is not what's going to grow and progress this church, because increased attendance doesn't summon the power of God. Increased faith does. Increased attendance is not going to do what God can do. Progress is not measured by increased ministries or activity. Progress in this church will be by increased faith in the increased members. So I conclude by asking this question because it's so important to where this church goes. How is your faith? Let's see. Contemporary English, I'm speaking to you singularly. How is your faith? Right there. Hey, how's your faith? Right there. How's your faith? How's your faith right there? Stop staring at me. How's your faith? You know why I'm concerned? Because Charlie's faith impacts this church. Why am I concerned? Because Doug's faith impacts this church. I'm concerned about that because that's my job, to see this church grow and progress. And see, the plan is not to increase gimmicks and programs. The plan is to increase your faith. Because that's when the walls come down and we go in. That's when the walls come down and we go save Rahab and her household. That's when the walls come down and we find the financial means to go meet the needs of other people in our community. That's when the walls come down and we go into the promised land and do more for the souls of people in our community. It's going to be because of you people. It's going to be because of your faith. Aren't you excited to have that opportunity? So often you sit back and say, well, it's the pastor's job to get this thing going. It's only our job to tell you how to do it. And it's your job to increase your faith. And then we do it together. This is about us and God. Not me or you and God. It's about us. This is congregational faith at its best. And by the time we're done, if we summon the power of God and He gets the glory, it's going to be by faith, Calvary Heights Baptist Church, ... Not any one individual in this place. It's going to be a congregational faith. I'm excited about it, and that's why I want you to join me on this journey of faith. Let's stand and have a word of prayer.